starting with attorneys, which one I am a fan of attorneys. However, they're not always needed. In fact, they should not be needed, right? The only reason attorneys exist is because the VA is not doing what the VA is supposed to do. Fact, okay? Same thing like a higher level review. A higher level review would not exist if the VA did what they were supposed to do. So there is a time and place for an attorney. And I always boil it down to three things an attorney really, really stands out from everyone else. One is a Q, a clear, unmistakable error. I've seen people get back pay all the way from 1995. Even if a 10% increase from 1995 to now, whether that's 10 to 20, 90 to 100 would be insane, okay? I've seen some absolutely huge, like 173,000. I've seen one that was 650 grand, and it's just like, whoa, okay? No one else is doing that except for the attorney. That's really where they are using 38 CFR, the M21 TAC 1, and then case law to really look at, hey, here's what happened in your situation. Okay, now I want to be very clear, pun there. Qs are very rare, right? So it's not like every single person from 1995 can go ahead and get a Q. It's very rare, but that's one thing they'll shine in. Another aspect attorneys shine in are supplemental appeals, especially when the veteran has evidence from service and they have the current diagnosis, but for whatever reason, the nexus could not be made by the examiner. Attorneys could really, really combat the rationale the examiner gave. So an example of that, let's say you're going sleep apnea. Sleep apnea is secondary to PTSD. You'll see in a lot of rationales where examiners will say, hey, sleep apnea, there's no evidence or journals that states causation from sleep apnea. There's definitely correlation, but not causation. And that's it. An attorney will go, okay, but where did it come from? You can't just say it's not PTSD because the burden of proof is not without a shadow of a doubt, right? It's at least as likely, 50-50. So if you're going to say sleep apnea is not aggravated or stems from the PTSD, well, where does it come from? And the attorney can really battle that and kind of pull the thread to get to that at least as likely burden of proof. That's really where they're going to shine. And then the third thing they're going to shine is just back pay. Effective dates, probably, I'm willing to bet my life that the number one thing the VA gets wrong are effective dates. Okay, if you do a supplemental appeal, you have the within 1 year, you do you submit that supplemental appeal within that 1 year time frame. What generally happens is the VA says, hey, we received this claim over here, October 2024, that's gonna be the intent to file date. And they totally missed the denial in the original intent to file, which by the way could have been years ago, depending on what that claim looks like. So that's really where attorneys are going to shine. Jason, I'm going to kick it over to you for any thoughts on attorneys, and then go ahead and transition into claims consulting companies, my absolute favorite topic of all time.
That's very true. Very true. So with attorneys, claims agents, that type of stuff, I'm in agreement. For the most part, you're not going to need that. An accredited veteran service officer is going to have plenty of experience to get you through most of the hurdles that you would have, even if the VA denies you up front or gives you some sort of an unfavorable decision. Because there's kind of a difference, right? A denial is like, you're not even service connected. So that's one thing that could happen with your original claim. Or they could say, hey, great, you're service connected, but you're 0%. And you could be thinking, oh, I should be 30. So at that level, I believe a VSO would do just fine working with either a HLR, higher level review, with the informal conference, if all the information is already submitted and clearly able to identify, the contrary to their findings, right? Mm-hmm. If not, the VSO would then say, you know what, I think we'd be better off with doing a supplemental. Let's get a little more evidence. Here's what I suggest, blah, blah, blah. And then they'd file that supplemental claim for you. I would even say that in some cases, and it's up to you, at the end of the day, it's all up to you and it's all your decision. Even going to the Board of Veterans Appeals, in some cases, you might still be okay with a VSO, but call an attorney, have a conversation with them, and gauge how comfortable you are with either one. If you feel ultimately more comfortable with an attorney, well, then you have that option, right? But don't. Here's my little 2 cents. Information's free.
Mhm.
Have the conversation, do the consult with the attorney, run it past them, get their 2 cents, and then you can make an informed decision on if or if not you need them for your appeal with the Board of Veterans Appeals. So personally, I think total for me, and I may mess it up, I think I filed maybe 7 claims total. I had 2 of them that I pushed for basically reviews, and then I pushed, and one was approved, one was denied. I just did it all myself. And then the third one I pushed to the Board of Veterans Appeals, of which they ended up ruling in my favor. So, I mean, can you do it by yourself? Sure, but it's all just kind of, I think it's nice to have a VSO, somebody else in your corner, somebody to kind of, whiteboard it with, if you will, and just make sure that you're on the right game plan and you got everything going in the right direction and you know the right things to say and blah, blah, blah. So I think going with an attorney, at least getting that initial consult at the board level is probably, at least want to get a consult at that point. Yeah, so that's pretty much it with the attorney stuff. Go for it, Clay.
Yeah, I wanted to add one more thing because you did make a point. I totally agree with you that you can represent yourself at the board. However, I will say this: it's not a. I think I can represent myself. I would argue veterans need to know, right? You need whatever that claim is: migraines, IBS, secondary, direct, whatever. You need to make that your business. So before you go to that board, you need to really understand your evidence. Maybe look at some other decisions that were made previously that are similar to yours. You got to be on top of your game. But I totally agree. However, I just think there's I would like to see veterans who represent themselves have a higher degree of understanding of everything with that claim and the process in general before
Agreed.
just saying,
don't just jump into
myself.
Yeah.
Family lawyers get a lawyer when they get divorced, right? So it's
right.
That tells me something.
Good point. And here's the thing: is that with the Board of Veterans Appeals, you have 3 different options. Okay, you can just have them look at what the VA's decisions were and then make their own decision. So you're not allowed to give any other information. Or you can elect to supply them with additional evidence, highly suggested. Or you can also select kind of the variation of, here's more information. And, oh, by the way, I want a face-to-face, whether virtual or in person or what have you. So, you get to kind of pick your flavor there. If for some reason you feel as though the VA, I think my suggestion to folks, do what you want, not telling you you have to do anything. But if it were me or a loved one, I would suggest at least going and getting a consult from an attorney. Let them have the overall picture of what you're dealing with, and then you can make an informed decision in that way. That's really I think the formal answer, right?
Yeah.
Is that's really what you should do. I love that you brought that up. That I think I made it this far. You've lost each time. So already. So let's keep that in mind. That your batting average isn't very high at this point. So and you're facing now an even more skilled pitcher. Now what? So anyway,